Oh boy, this is going to be a long story. It started at 6 years old, if you can believe it. We were in kindergarten and my grandmom and his were friends. He was pretty sick back then, so everybody indulged him in his behavior. Whatever. I was a willful child, so I didn't, because even then he made me feel uncomfortable in a way. There's even a picture of us somewhere where he's trying to hold my hand and I just pull away. I never did anything, hit him, or bully him. I just avoided him. Years passed, I finished elementary school and heard he'd undergone the surgery needed to make him better. I was happy to hear that it went okay, because who wants a child to die? He moved out of town, so we eventually just lost contact. Cue to the last year of high school. Somebody adds me on Yahoo Messenger, and not knowing who it was, I didn't accept the friend request and asked who it was first. But he wouldn't say until I threatened to block him. He said who it was, and honestly I was happy to hear from him. He seemed okay. We laughed, said we'd maybe go to a concert together that summer and all of that. I didn't make it to the concert. We both started college, in towns 500 miles or so apart, and spoke from time to time. At the end of that school year, I got myself a boyfriend. I didn't realize it then, but he stopped talking to me for the whole year. It should have been a signal, but I was oblivious. I didn't give it much thought, and he'd been offline for long periods of time before. Another year passes, and the next summer he writes to me that he's coming to town on a Friday and if we wanted to meet. Sure, why not? I take him to a park. We talk a little. He says that he's sad because he can't go to a music festival because he has no one to go with, and his mom won't let him go alone because he has frail health. I say that he can tag along with us, my boyfriend and our friends, if he wants to. He agrees happily. But here comes the freaky part. Some point I ask him how his grandmother is. He tells me with the biggest grin possible that she's been dead for a few years. That grin froze me. It was sort of sick. I left soon after, which I had been planning on doing anyways, since I had to go back to some classes. And that night I told my boyfriend. He said, "Listen, it's up to you, but I think you should avoid him altogether." He spoke my mind, and I did. Another year passes and I start a semester abroad in Sweden. I loved it quite a lot there, and went to a lot of concerts and stuff. One evening this very weird Facebook account starts messaging me. "So, you're up there sucking Swedish dick for concert money?" I blocked it, and somewhere in the back of my head, a suspicion started building. I can't prove anything yet, so I just lay low until one day he messages me from his official Facebook account. "You whore, you like Swedish dick?" Now, at the time I had started dating someone in Sweden. I had broken up with my boyfriend back home some 6 months before, and I was tagged in a photo with him at a Therion concert. But that's not a reason to send this kind of message since, I didn't owe him anything, and it's my business what I do. I block him, but during the next few months I get no less than 87 new fake accounts messaging me and my friends and calling us names and sending us death threats. When I return home, I get a hold of his mother's phone number and give her a call. All she does is complain how he's sick and he should just be indulged. I tell her that I'll be calling the police, to which she replies that if I do, I'm heartless, since they're gonna take him away. I end up emailing her a zip file of all the messages that he had sent to all of us, to which she replies that I'm a liar. Her son would never do that, and she's gonna call the police on me since I'm trying to blackmail her. I politely announced to her that I had been recording the whole conversation and there's no blackmail anywhere. It's just me asking her to do something about it. She just hangs up and never answers again. The messages continue to come. I reported him to the police sometime in April, but nothing happens. In July, we're going to a music festival out of town. Since I had been there before, I tell my friends to stay right outside the train station while I go grab us some bus tickets from the ticket machine some 100 feet away. From right behind, he pops out like in a bad movie. "I'm Santa Claus," he says and starts laughing. I start back towards my friends, not letting him out of my sight. Luckily, they've seen him too, so they come towards me. He just runs away. For the 4 days we're there, I never felt safe. He's small and thin, but he might have had a knife or even a gun, so we stick together at all times. That was in 2011. He's been bothering us ever since. Some of my friends actually died in a fire 2 years ago, and he just sent us messages in which he mocks them, and he threats that he's going to burn all of us too. I've reported him 6 times over the years. Once he was taken to a mental ward for a month or so, but that's about it. He actually hacked my Facebook account once, but I managed to get it back, and now it's as secured as it can possibly be and everything's set on private. I ask my friends not to tag me in photos anymore. I keep as low of a profile as I can, and I avoid going to concerts alone. I'm much stronger than he is, but again, he might have a gun or something. I'm not really afraid, but you never know. I just hate it that my friends have to go through this too. I'm a guy, and I used to be a bartender. I was working a shift one night, and I started chatting to this girl. She seemed nice enough, so I asked her out, and a couple of days later we go on a very casual date. It was literally just to meet up for some coffee and a chat, that's it. My next shift starts at the bar, and she turns up, alone, and sits at the other end of the bar. I'm just doing my job, and I start having a laugh and a joke with one of the regulars. This crazy girl storms over and starts full-blown screaming at the other girl. She tells her to stop, quote, flirting with my boyfriend, and it nearly gets physical. The bouncers are actually already over, standing by to chuck her out. So, I tell Crazy that I'm not her boyfriend, that we've been on one single date that only lasted an hour. And if that's how she's going to react when I just talk to another woman, especially when I'm just serving a customer, she can fuck right off. She screams at me and storms away. The next day I woke up to about 50 text messages, starting with, "I'm sorry." Then, "Why aren't you answering?" Then a ton of abuse. Then she'd apologized for the whole thing and would start over again with, "I'm sorry." I just blocked her number. At my next work shift, she comes screaming into the bar, begging for forgiveness. That she's super sorry. That she wants me to unblock her number, please. I tell her in no uncertain terms to fuck right off and to leave me alone. Screams, tears, and another storm off. Then, a few nights later, I was going to bed. I turned off my bedroom light and my phone goes off. A text from a number I didn't recognize that just says, quote, "Good night." I look out of my window and she's parked across the street just watching my house. That went on for a week or two, and then the strangest part happened. I was at work and she walked in again. She came to the bar and told me that she was there with her new boyfriend. I breathed a sigh of relief while pitying the poor fucker. Then her new boyfriend walked in. He was my fucking doppelganger. I mean, people could have mistook us for twins. He even wore the same glasses as I did. So I was just standing there in shock, and she introduced this new guy to me as her, quote, ex. It's only funny looking back now, but the look on that guy's face when he realized he was me was just pure, oh fuck, she's insane. So she makes a big deal of basically wrapping herself around him all night in front of me, while he looked more and more uncomfortable. Then at some point he leaves, and she tries to get behind the bar crying hysterically that she was only dating him to make me jealous and she really loved me, not him. The ending is pretty anticlimactic. I went to the police station and reported her and asked how I could get a restraining order, but I never ended up needing one. Being removed from the front of my house on another late night camping session by the police scared her into leaving me alone completely. These two girls started working at my company at the same time. They were friends and had applied together. After the first few weeks, I had realized that one of them had some sort of mental problem. She would say very odd, random things to everyone and freak out over nothing. She once exploded on me for not fixing a machine that kept having problems, claiming that I didn't do anything all day and just sat at the computer. So, a few months go by and she waves at me to go help her with something. When I get there, she starts telling me how I have this chance to be with her friend and what kind of flowers she likes. I was just speechless. I never even spoke to the other girl. She then went on to say that I should never cross my arms or put my hands in my pockets around her. I said, okay, and walked back to my desk, not understanding what had just happened. Over the next few weeks, things just kept escalating. She started leaving notes at my desk with the friend's phone number, trying to set me up on dates with her, and trying to get me to travel to Vegas with them, etc. I would just nod and try to make her go away as fast as possible whenever she talked to me. Other coworkers didn't believe what I was telling them about this girl. They started to tease me and would have a great time listening to my stories. Then one day, they too experienced one of her meltdowns when we were all at our desks at the same time. She started yelling at me that the friend and I needed to resolve our differences because she was taking it out on her car, whatever that meant. She caught me in a bad mood and I snapped right back at her. I told her that if she had a problem, she could take it up with management, so she did. She went to the managers and told them the entire fantasy that she'd been bothering me with. It didn't take long for them to realize that this girl was nuts. Keep in mind, I never spoke a word to the other girl. I suspect what happened is that the friend may have said that she thought I was attractive once, and the other one fabricated an entire story in her head. They both left a short time after that last incident, but it wasn't the end of the craziness. Months later, I found out from someone else that she'd been lying to other people about me. She had claimed that I got the friend pregnant with triplets and that she had a miscarry. I'm sure that there are other things that she said about me too that I still haven't heard about. This was some 15 years ago, but I'll do my best to remember the sequence of events. The person in question is my ex. We were together for over a year when I ended the relationship. There was cheating, creepiness, terminal deadbeatness, and some early stalker signs that I should have noticed but wrote off as caring. I didn't have the money to move far away from him, so I took an apartment in the same apartment complex because they would waive my security deposit, as I already had another lease there anyway. It was right after I moved that he obtained the key. From what I can assume, he took one of my keys from my key ring when he was dropping off some belongings that I had left when I moved out. Over the next week is when I started to notice things in my apartment were different than when I had left for work. The blinds would be changed, he used my toilet and didn't flush it. Generally, it just felt like things were off. This continued for about a month. It wasn't every day that things were weird, but a few times a week. Eventually, one of my neighbors informed me that someone had been hanging around outside at night. He had spoken with him, and my ex tried to question him about me. Apparently, he also spoke with several of my other neighbors as well. He tried to become friends with some sketchy couple who lived in the apartment downstairs from me. One day I came home from work in the early evening. I was a server at a restaurant directly across from my apartment, so my routine wasn't exactly varied or hard to follow. But I didn't always get home at the exact same time. So I get home and I head for a quick pee. While I'm doing my business, I hear the faintest whisper of noise from the shower. And while I was sitting on the toilet, I pulled back the curtain. I don't remember exactly what I expected to see. Nothing, I guess. But there was my ex crouched in the shower with a camera, to which he said, "Surprise!" Surprise? Quick thinking on his part, I guess. I was certainly surprised. There was a lot of, "What are you doing in my shower? How did you get in my apartment?" The blatant lies that followed are not in my recollection, but I'm sure you can imagine the types of stories that a person can come up with on the fly to sound mildly plausible, except you know they're BS because they're clearly just BS. The door was unlocked. I stopped by to see if you wanted to get dinner, and the door was open, so I let myself in to wait for you. Things like that. Plausible in some strange way, but yet, no. Even more no, because he had a camera with him, and in that moment all the weirdness from the past months just slips into my brain. So, yada yada, he leaves. I call the sheriff and the apartment manager. The manager came and changed my locks that night, and the sheriff came and took a report. After the shower incident, he still didn't really get with the program. He continued to lurk around outside of my apartment, stopping at my job, showing up at places that he shouldn't have been, or even at friends' homes far away that he had never met and wouldn't know how to get to unless he was actively following me. At this point, it was aggressive stalking. There was some incident involving him trying to kick in doors of my friends' homes. With my police reports in hand, I went down to the court and filed the request for a restraining order. This was served to him quite quickly, although I don't remember the time frame involved between filling out the details and when it was executed. Within 30 minutes of being served that order, though, my phone was ringing and it was from a woman calling on his behalf, which was a violation of the order. She said that she was his girlfriend and there was a big misunderstanding on my part. No, honey, I'm not the one that was misunderstanding the situation. That would be you. I called the police and they arrived and asked where he would be at this time. I sat at work and provided them the location. They went to arrest him. His time served wasn't very long. He did a work release program or something like that, and it didn't ever really seem like he was in jail. The one other really noteworthy thing that prompted a visit from the sheriff was that before one of my court dates, I went out to find my car wouldn't start. I inspected it and found something disconnected inside, and on the ground next to my car was a pin from where he was working. The cops couldn't really conclude that it was from him or deliberate and not just a car malfunction, but I knew. Eventually, mentally, he moved on to new prey and forgot about me, I guess. After a few years, I moved out of state and never returned to Florida. I still seek him out online to block his profiles even though it has been 15 years. You never know with people like that what's in their brain. But a preemptive block across all social media seemed wise. I went to go visit my dad out of state because I was just really, really needing to get away from my extremely toxic mom and her family for a while. Toward the end of my vacation, I was like, I'm a legal adult. There's nothing stopping me from just staying here. And at that moment, I decided it was better for my mental health and overall well-being to just stay near my dad. My mom flipped her shit. I told her, I just really want some space. When I'm ready to talk to you, I'll call you. But they have no sense of boundaries, so she and my half-sister consistently called my dad's house trying to get me to come back to live with them. My sister would call, hang up when I wouldn't answer, and then call again right away so that there would be 30 missed calls on our caller ID in the span of 30 minutes. When I wouldn't pick up the phone, my sister switched to bombarding my MySpace inbox with one insane message after another at 3 a.m. I started noticing weird things around town. Cars I didn't recognize would slow down by me when I was out walking. People that I had just met would suddenly know things about me and ask about my mom like they were trying to get info. My mom actually called out of the blue one day and asked about my hair. When I lived with her, she always made me keep it long as a means of control. My hair is very thick, heavy, and on the dry side, so it was always a nightmare to keep it down past my waist like she wanted. After I decided to stay with my dad, one of the first things that I did was chop off my hair to be super short. It felt great getting rid of it all, and I found out after all this time my hair was actually curly. I never knew because all the hair weighted down my curls. So, when my mom called and gave me this really bitchy, "How long is your hair now?" I just told her, I cut it because it's my hair. Why? Do you have people out here spying on me? She sputtered, What? No? I just asked because I'm your mom, and I could just feel that you cut your hair because moms always know stuff like that about their children. Yeah, sure, whatever. After a year, my dad and I moved to a different house and never gave my mom or her family the new address. I never filled out a change of address form, but when my maternal grandmother sent me this really weird card in the mail, she addressed it to the old house. The post office wrote my new address on it and sent it back to her, and she resent it to my new place. After that, random cars would start showing up in our driveway and just sit there. Our driveway wasn't lit. It was on a main road with a lot of traffic, and if you didn't know the driveway was there, you'd miss it. My friends would miss it, even though they knew it was coming up, or they started parking on the side street because my driveway was such a pain in the ass. This wasn't the type of place you pulled into to turn around. Yet, here we are with these cars parking outside in our drive. My stepmom caught one as soon as she opened the door to ask, "Can I help you?" The car just ended up booking it and went off down the street. I had a job at a fast food restaurant to pay for college, and things were good until one day someone comes in and says in the sing-song voice, "Oh hi, it's so good to see you." I look and there's this woman standing on the other side of the counter, and it took me forever to recognize her as my mom's sister-in-law. I didn't talk to her, but apparently she called my maternal grandmother and mom right away to let me know that she found me and where I was working. Then, mom packs up her entire family, her parents, my half-siblings, my insane sister, her husband, their kids, everybody, and drove halfway across the country to show up at my job unannounced to, I don't fucking know what, but they were filming me with a video camera, and with a whole crowd of them, I have a feeling that my mom was attempting to gang kidnap me because she kept trying to get me to come out from behind the counter while they were all crowded around. I refused and wouldn't answer with anything but, "I'm at work and you need to leave." There's really no ending to this because 13 years later I'm still dealing with their bullshit. It's not as frequent as it used to be, but every once in a while they can't help but try to send me messages through whatever means they can try to contact me in, like LinkedIn messages or something just to be fucking annoying. Thankfully, I have a really great assistant that runs my work Facebook page, so not only does she catch the crazy so I don't have to see it, she gets a taste of their insanity firsthand, so there's some validation there. I wanted a prom date in 1986. What I ended up with was a fucking psychopath. He was abusive as hell, and it took me 4 years to get away from him safely. I'd go to the police, and they'd tell me that he just liked me and wanted to date me. I'd go to my parents, and they'd say, "It's not our problem." I had to take extreme measures to get away from this guy. I had tried to break up with him a few times before. Once, he jumped off the roof of a shopping mall and hurt his leg. Another time, his friend called me and told me to look out of my bedroom window. There was Psycho Ass in a fucking tree with a rifle pointed at my little sister's bedroom window. I finally got rid of him in 1990 when he told me that only death would separate us. I faked an overdose of pills. I didn't take them all, but I made it look like I had. I knew I'd be found. My roommate took me to the ER, and I drank the fucking liquid charcoal. I told my psychiatrist on duty that my death was the only way to get rid of this guy. Yes, I wasn't thinking clearly, and yes, it was a shitty thing to fake. But finally, someone had listened to me and put me in touch with services and support so I could get away safely. He moves away at the end of that summer, and I'm free. Or am I? 1991, I get random shit in the mail. Carpet samples, samples of Depends, Elvis commemorative plates, just weird shit. I know it's him. I'm in my first apartment. The apartment across the hall opens up, and who moves in? That's right, Psycho Ass. The building is for sale. Who buys the fucking building? Psycho Ass. I'm not kidding. He bought my apartment building. No idea where or how he got the money. I moved out in the middle of the night, and I took my shit and ran. I get a new job, but I get fired because of a customer complaint. I point out that the complaint was from a time that I wasn't working. I get a new apartment. My landlord calls me a few weeks later into his office to ask if I really am turning tricks in my apartment. Weird shit like that keeps happening. He keeps popping up and undermining my life, my friends, and he tells anyone I date that he's going to kill them, that we're still dating and I'm cheating on him with the new guy. By 1996, I've moved halfway across the country. It was awesome. He had no idea where I was and I was so happy. Unfortunately, I had to move home in 1998, and he kept fucking with me. I would come home and all of my radio stations would be tuned one digit down, like 95.7 would be 95.5. There was an alarm clock in my closet that went off at 3 a.m. He let the air out of my tires. Thankfully, a cop ended up moving in upstairs, and that's when the fucking with stopped. I don't hear from him or see him until 2002. He fucking strolls into my work, and I worked at a store. I quit immediately after that. I'm married by that point, and I tell my husband what's up, and we end up moving. The last time I saw him was in 2008. I was dropping my son off at a day camp, and I hear my name across the street. It's Psycho Ass. He's got a camera with a long lens on it. I keep my cool, I ignore him, I go into the camp office and tell them that there's a guy across the street taking pictures of the kids as they're being dropped off. They end up calling the police. There's a bit of a dust-up, and he's thrown on the ground and driven off. That's the last I've heard or seen from him, and I hope that he rots. I'm still being stalked, because he's never been violent, and the police seem to think it's no big deal. I'll try to keep this story short. 10 years ago I started playing a video game, and I met a guy. He was nice, but definitely not my type, as I was figuring out where I was on the Kinsey scale at the time. We became friends, and he started trying to date me. I informed him he wasn't my type, but I really did want to be friends. He accepted that, and we were friends, but he would consistently try to roleplay our characters in this game being in a relationship. I was okay with it. It was just a game. A few years passed, and we were pretty good friends. I've now figured out that I'm bisexual, and I'm cool with that. As I've lived in a major city at the time, he happened to be passing through and asked if we could meet up to hang out for a little while. I said sure, and we went to my favorite bar and had a few drinks. Then I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in my bed, naked, and he informed me that we just had amazing sex and I had confessed my love to him. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that I had been drugged and raped, so I convinced myself that I must have feelings for him. Except I suddenly hated him with every fiber of my being. We were together for 3 months, and then I did my best to vanish completely. I moved across the country, got a new phone, ceased talking to 90% of my family who liked him. I changed my username in the game and acted like nothing was going on. However, one of the administrators of said game let it slip about my name change, and after about 6 months he found me. He started messaging my character all the time. He got a hold of my in-game friends and got my new email as well. He used my family's email addresses to get them to give up my new phone number and address. And he was there, all the time. I called the police, and they said since he wasn't violent, it was no big deal. Finally, I moved to Chicago, and I married a man who could break him in half. Now he only comes around sometimes. I'm sorry this is getting a little bit disjointed, because talking about this still upsets me a lot. I had a coworker who was a bit of a loner. I was 16 and I felt bad for him because he seemed like a genuinely nice person. When he asked me to hang out, I agreed, but I clarified early on that I wanted to hang out as just friends. He assured me that there would be other people there too. So we meet somewhere to hang out and no one else shows up. It's just him and I. I thought this was odd, but didn't think too much of it. He started going off about how much he liked me and how perfect I was, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I came up with an excuse to leave and wrote the whole thing off as a bad date. The next day forward, I start receiving text messages. I later came to find out that he stole my phone number from the work computer. He kept sending me messages about wanting to see me, and it progressed to him consistently calling and texting. I did my best to act polite at work, but ignored all of his attempts to communicate. A few days pass, and I get a call from my little brother that someone's at the door for me with flowers and cake. I asked him to describe what the person looked like, and sure enough, it was him. He stole my address from the work computer as well. I told my brother to quickly get back into the house. That night, I go home and I swear I see camera flashes outside my window. I started to get really freaked out and told my mom about this person consistently calling and texting me and showing up at our house now. My mom told me to tell my manager at work, and we decided we would file some type of complaint. A week passes and I hear nothing from him, and I thought that perhaps he had enough. But alas, I get a call from him after a week from a different number, and he starts telling me how he wants to marry me, and I'm the only reason he's alive. I told him to stop bothering me, and I want nothing to do with him anymore. He calls again though the next day from a different number while I'm at work and tells me he wants to come see me at my house. I tell him that I don't want him anywhere near me and to leave me alone. I go home and go to bed as usual. Well, around 3 a.m., my mom comes into my room and tells me to come downstairs. A cop is waiting in our doorway, and he begins to question me as soon as I make it down the stairs. How do you know him? Do you know where he is? Apparently he left home and his family got worried. They told the cop that I'm his girlfriend. I told the cop the situation. The next day I go to work and he doesn't show up. Everyone knew that he was missing because his family had called the place we worked. Everyone asked me, do you know where he is? And everyone knew that he liked me and assumed that I knew. Well, around noon, a coworker comes up to me and says that she needs to talk to me, and we go to the break room. She tells me that they found him. Good, I thought. I'm glad that he's okay. She tells me to sit down and whispers in my ear. He shot himself. I just collapsed off the chair and felt a pain in my chest that I never felt before. What did I do? I thought. For the next few months, everyone treated me like a ghost. Everyone at work blamed me for his death. His brother called me and told me how sorry he was for my loss, and that he has a bunch of my stuff at his house. Mind you, I never stepped into that home, or gave anything of mine to him. His brother knew everything about me, and I had no idea who this person even was. I felt so much guilt that I couldn't tell him what was really going on. A year or so after this happened, I came to find out that he drove to my house and shot himself a few streets over from my neighborhood. This story still embarrasses me to this day. I was in high school and I was one of the top students in my class, so I decided to train for a national competition. The teacher of the subject started giving me particular classes on recess. I barely have any friends that year, so I didn't mind. Nothing weird happened on those classes, but my classmates started making fun of me and saying I have a crush on the teacher. The teacher seemed pleased about that. He was twice my age, and I joked in class that if we saw the age difference as a fraction, it would be less and less every year. I went to the contest, got a nice place, and the next year I got a different teacher on that subject and made lots of friends in my new class. The teacher went with us on a week-long school trip. The last day he said he wanted to talk to me. A guy friend insisted to be with us. The teacher told me that I was one of the most important people in his life, that I helped him get out of a depression, and that I was in a special place of his heart. It was late at night and I was getting more and more sleepy, so my guy friend told me that we should go to our bedrooms, and he, my friend, escorted me to my room. Now I realized that he did all of that to protect me because he was suspicious of that teacher. Several years later, my sister went to the same high school and got him as a teacher. He insisted to train my sister for the same contest on recess. My sister has amazing talents, and has won some competitions herself, but she wasn't particularly interested in that subject. However, he insisted on training her on recess, and isolated her from all of her friends. My sister used to be very social and became a loner because of that. Again, nothing sexual happened between any of us, but it was wildly inappropriate. After that, the teacher got my mother's number. We suspect that he got it from our student file, and started to text her nonstop. He has some important problems going on in his life, struggling with suicidal thoughts, things like that, but my mother didn't tell me that at the time. He kept asking my mother for help, but never going through. My mother was exhausted, but she felt bad because he kept threatening to take his own life, so she kept responding at odd hours. One day, my mom told me he has sent me an email and wanted me to read it. I saw the email with a Word document attached. It was more than 10 pages long. I was furious. I realized that I hated him. I hated that he was isolating my sister, and I hated that he didn't keep his boundaries with his students, and I especially hated to see my mom tired of his nonsense. So I deleted the email without reading it. Finally, my mother invited him to the house to have lunch, and he behaved like the creepy weirdo that he was. He was touching things in my bedroom delicately, opening all the drawers. My father was fed up with everything, so politely, he told him that we were having a very busy year and suggested he got professional help with the depression and to leave us alone. My mom started responding less and less, and she cut him from our lives. The principal ended up calling my mother to her office and told her he didn't approve the, quote, recess classes and forbade him from doing that again. I know that he still holds a grudge against our family, but after my father killed him with politeness, he hasn't tried to contact us again. In my last year of high school, I took classes at the local community college for college and high school credit. I was 17 at the time, and there was one kid who happened to be in two of my classes, a communications class and then a psychology class. He was in a group with me for a project in our communications class, and we exchanged emails to keep in contact. I'm a pretty friendly person and easy to get along with, and I assumed he mistook my friendly nature as romantic interest. He asked me if I had a Facebook. I said no, not really. I had a private one that I rarely ever checked, so I told him not to bother adding me. He then started showing up outside of other classes I was taking, but it was a small campus, so I shrugged it off and assumed I just had never noticed him there before. Then he started telling me about how he found me on Facebook even after I told him not to look for me. And why haven't I accepted his friend request yet? It was at this point I learned he was 25, and he was fully aware that I was 17 and still in high school. He also was very Mormon, and went out of his way to talk to me about his religion, despite the fact I told him I was atheist, as well as my family. He was showing up at more and more places then, like my favorite coffee shop, or the grocery store when I was with my friends. He had made sure to sit right next to me or behind me in both classes we had together. After class would let out at 7 p.m., he would run after me to try to talk, and despite my one-worded answers and less than friendly demeanor at this point, he wouldn't leave me alone. His questions then became more personal. He was asking me if I was seeing anyone, or if I wasn't, and why not, etc. The breaking point for me was when I would be the first to leave class to try to get to my car before he could catch up to me. He would then run after me and grab my arm in an attempt to talk to me. It was at that moment I realized this wasn't just an awkward dude being awkward, but that he wasn't afraid to physically hurt me. I told a girl in my class, and she ended up walking with me to my car every night afterwards. I didn't go out anymore, and soon after the school year ended, I went to college out of state, where I now live full-time. I've scrubbed all social media, and all of my friends are aware not to give out my info to anyone. I'm really lucky that I could move and cut off all contact before it escalated even further, but I'm very wary and hesitant to give out any new information when I meet people. Bonus, this dude couldn't drive a car, and I saw him being picked up and dropped off by his mother on occasion, meaning that all of those, quote, instances of us running into each other were him asking his mom to drop him off to stalk me.